all picked up. I'm going to start a little bit with myself. So one of the first things that I picked up in this place was sort of the energy of the most recent history. So I'm not talking about ancient history, maybe the last, I don't know, 100 years or something along those lines. And so this place has a really powerful imprint of, at one time, being like a pretty prominent location, right? Opulence, good things, money, wealth, being able to build and flourish. And then that sort of status feels like it begins to, actually I'll keep the status the same, but what's actually available in terms of wealth and family and fortune, it feels like there's a diminishing that's happened there. But the energy that's carried with it is almost like we still need to present like we have something, okay? And so that feels like a more recent energy that occurred here. So it just, that dwindling of just wealth, power, status feels like it's so heavy here. It's like so heavy here. And I feel like there would have been one or two people that really lived in that energy for a long time. It feels very isolating. I feel isolated when I'm here. And I think that may not have always been the case, because I feel like there was history of family and gathering and community, but then I feel like that really changed, and that whole imprint of energy. This place is telling me that story. And then the other thing that I've picked up here, two things. One, the woods here are alive, okay? Like beyond the fact that we've got living plants, right? There are spirits of land here, but I think they might have been misunderstood over time because they don't feel malevolent to me. They feel more sort of in a guardianship capacity of the land, but very, very discerning about people being here. There are also spirits here that don't want us here. And I'm not sure if any of you have picked that up or not, but I have a really clear, distinct feeling about that. And some of the occurrences we already had, like the big tree snapping there after we moved, Todd being hit in the head with a branch, there's a clear communication that they don't want us here. And sometimes ghosts or untransitioned spirits don't want us here because we have the power to shift their reality, to either vacate them from a space or assist them in moving on in their soul's journey, and they don't want to. And they have an opinion about that, and I think they're letting us know that today. So that's very, very real here. And the last thing is a young male spirit that I've picked up here that actually does have a bit of a mischievous energy to him. I had mentioned he actually approached me looking kind of similar to Daniel. Not so much in physical appearance, but almost like what he's wearing. That's what he looked like to me. And then I had a sense that either he might have worked with horses or mechanics, because I can see a wheel, okay? And that's what he's presenting to me with. I do not feel that he's transient. And we've talked about this before, right? Sometimes we have transient spirits. They didn't originate in a place. They never lived here. They didn't spend time here, but they've landed here, right, through the ethers. I actually feel like this person was resident here in some way. So it'd be interesting if we could look up some of that to see if there might have been just like a young, I don't know, maybe a stable hand, something along those lines. But I am picking him up. And you know, the purpose of our work here today isn't to move a spirit along or a ghost along or a you know, earthbound or grounded spirit. So I'm not doing that, but I do know that he's here. Okay, so let's move on to you guys. We'll start with Cynthia.
Okay. Well, when you brought up the energy of the man that kind of resembles Daniel in the sense, that's what I drew.
Okay.
So what I was picking up was I was getting a male energy. It felt very luring. Like it felt like he was trying to lure children, but not in the sex trafficking way. It felt like more of a payment. Like it was given as a payment to a family. So I'm picking up like I was picking up like maybe like gambling, like something like not necessarily. I don't know how to describe it. It just felt like there was an exchange of, well, I'll take the children to pay off a debt type idea, but it felt more towards gambling. I also picked up a fire. My throat started closing, my head felt a little foggy, and my eyes felt like they were smoky. And I felt that it was more coming from that area in the corner there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I felt that there was two children. I could feel a boy and a girl energy.
Okay.
And that's what I got so far.
Thank you. PJ?
So I had a very similar feeling in the forest. I kept getting drawn out there, and it felt like the trees were waving at me. It felt like there were people like in the forest, so I kept just looking in there trying to figure out what that was. So when you were saying that it was alive, that's the sense that I got as well. I also wrote here, it felt like there was some tyrannical owner of the property, and I felt a get out. I got get out. So I just wrote that as well. And I got drawn to the back quite a bit, and when I was standing there, I got a lot of feeling of dizziness, drunkenness, and just like not being balanced properly. Those sort of feelings I got here.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I similarly got that tyrant sort of energy. It was like a male heavy set. I felt like I saw mismanagement of money, like gambling, like it got to be really, really bad. Like I saw ledgers being signed here, financial ledgers, paperwork, like a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of abuse and punishment for, you know, if things weren't done a certain way. But that same guy was very, like, I got that same thing. I think I saw the same guy you were mentioning, because he was like, I saw an image of a girl, name started with an S, like a Sarah. She was like a cook or something, like she worked in like the kitchen. And he said he actually gave me the word. He said I was a hand worker, like doing things by hand, right? And he had an affair with her or something, but it wasn't like an extramarital thing. It was like they were together, sort of thing. Then I also got really quick. The kitchen was the heart of the home, and hidden secrets, hidden ledgers, also kind of like hiding money too. And the land, when I connected with the land, really interesting. The land was saying that it needs to be reconsecrated. It needs to be given back from the ownership and the energy of the greed. That would free everybody, and that's when it's like like we don't want to go. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks. Thank you.
Lisa?
I also picked up on a young girl in the back, and I picked up on a kitchen fire, grease fire in the back area back here. In the middle, I was picking up on gardens, and I was picking up on a woman who she presented as like the lady of the manor, and she had her hair coiffed and up on her head, piled high. She was dressed in those times with a long dress to the floor in white. She enjoyed spending time in the drawing room, which was in the middle part of the area, and looking out over the gardens, having her morning tea. At the front of the house, I was picking up trapped, that she was trapped upstairs in the bedroom during the time she felt very overwhelmed with fear. There was a lot of wind energy going on, definitely things flying, and the wind actually fueled the fire. And she was looking for her lover to come to save her. And I also got images of somebody coming down the road with horse and buggy in like this mad panic, seeing the fire from far away and trying to get there. So everybody trying to put it out, but not being able to, and a lot of fear, a lot of terror in this area.
I've already talked to.
Okay, we can switch over then to Paula.
I spent a lot of time, or most of my time, over in that back corner, and when I got there, it was fine. But then after a while, I was just content to be there. But I had I was not content, but I just, if like somebody took the batteries out of you, you're just content to sit there and just turn your brain off and just sit and not really connect or do anything. You just find being there doing nothing is what it felt like. And then after a while, I was describing, you know, when you're a kid and you touched an 8-volt battery to your tongue and you had that vibrating feeling. I had that all the way down my back, and it was this constant vibrating feeling. So when we left, because I said let's experiment, so we left, it went away. That feeling went away. But when I was here talking, just talking about nothing but just talking, it started again from the top of my head to the middle of my back, just that battery tingle, if you will. So I had tingling, and when I got up to I went to the woods, I was looking out. It seemed like I felt like it was somebody went there to be alone, and they were sad, they were lonely. It just, if they went up there, it wasn't for a good reason. They weren't in a good spot if they went to the back of the woods to look. And I don't see like you guys see, but I thought I saw like a little girl that would have walked around the upstairs maybe and looking out the windows. And that was what she would do to kind of make her day go by. And when you shooed me away and I went and sat over there, I immediately, when I sat down, I smelt flowers, and there's no flowers there. So, and that's about, I'm not as good as you ladies yet, but that's what I got.
You're great. You're great.
Last. So when Paula and I went to sit at the back on that little window ledge, I said to her that I was starting to feel disoriented, not right. And I kept saying, what's the word? You know, I couldn't really find the right word. Love lost. I also wrote down like an oppressive feeling, lethargic, sad. Same thing, didn't want to do anything, just sit and be for the next 10 hours. I heard someone coughing, which was you, and my first thought was, I wonder if she's feeling choked or like a lack of air, something's happening. So, because the look on your face, it seemed like that. So, yeah, and a headache. I just feel sort of sick a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's not uncommon at all in sort of like an energy vacuum downward in locations like this, where we feel like literally quite physically very heavy,
Yes.
depleted and drained. I mean, we've done so many investigations, and on a number of them, our brand new mic batteries will drain just like that. Change them, drain again. So that draining effect is felt by us, but sometimes it's also, you know, some type of phenomenon that's occurring in electronics that we're using as well.
But when we were out in the parking lot, everyone was bubbly, chipper, upper, and happy, and it was a 180 over
Yeah.
there.
That's a good observation.
And that's what we were saying. We were giggling. We couldn't wait to get here. And then
Yeah,
if you
now
had
it
said
just,
goodbye,
let's
we're
go.
going, we would have said, see ya. We're just going to stay sitting here.
Yeah.
It's also a good learning opportunity for you to understand that the energy of a place can impact you, right? And then conversely, your energy, the energy of the people that used to live here, can impact a place. We're constantly in energetic exchange. Fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, listening to all the impressions that you guys got, I'm amazed, because a lot of what you were talking about, especially you, Marianne, it was like dead on. Sorry for the pun. It was dead on. So I thought I'll start with the history. I'm not going to get too specific with everybody's experiences, but I think you'll pick out the little points from what I'm talking about, and then I'll go into a few of the ghost experiences too. So where we're standing now is the 1850s house, but this is not the history of this land. It goes back much further. You go back to the early 1800s when a religious man named George Sheed, he was a reverend. His goal was to bring religion to the newly founded town of Ancaster. He did. None of you guys saw it. When you turn onto Sulphur Springs Road, there's that beautiful church kind of sitting up on the hill with the graveyard. That's the one he founded. So he built his house not here, but if you go out the front door to the left into the woods there, that's where it's located, or where it was originally, because there's absolutely nothing left. Not even a foundation, nothing at all. So he was living there for only a couple of years, and then he died. He died before his dream was realized, before the church was finished, and the first mass they held in the church was in the man's honor. He's now buried in that cemetery. Now his house and grounds were sold to a military man named Colonel Otto Ives. Now he was a British soldier. The last battle he fought in was the Greek War of Independence. But as he fought in that war, he realized he didn't enjoy it anymore. That wasn't the life for him. He was tired of seeing young men die on the battlefield. And then after this, the war's done, he then retires. Now it just so happens, He met a beautiful Greek woman named Magdalene. That might have factored into the decision a little bit. So it was his wife Magdalene, her niece, whom Otto saw as a daughter, and together as a family they moved here. So they bought the Sheed house, took over the grounds. Now they became the players on the stage for the most famous legend in this town's history. But I'm going to come back to that. So 30 years after they moved in, they then moved out. It was then in the 1850s that a man named George Leith bought these lands. Now George was the second son of Scottish royalty. And being the second son meant you got nothing. A swift kick in the butt out the door, maybe a little bit of spending money, right? So he brings that money here, he buys the lands, but the Sheed house wasn't enough for him. So he tore down that house and built what you see around you. So this was the Leith family home starting from the 1850s. Now they lived here in relative peace. The house, the back buildings, the grounds, they had farms. This is where the term hermitage comes from. You know, it's derived from the word hermit, meaning on its own out here alone. So this is where he would live for about half a century. Now as we get to the early 1900s, George then passes away. And the grounds and the house gone to his youngest daughter, Alma. Now Alma loved these lands. Alma lived here, but as well she held what she would call, I guess, tea parties. So she was a writer for the Hamilton Spectator. She's actually one of the original historians for Hamilton. So she would have lavish tea parties inside the house. And during one of the parties, a fire started. Now, they got to it, they put it out, everything was fine, but it was almost an omen of things to come. Because a few years later, she had a bigger tea party and a bigger fire in 2 spots of the house. Couldn't get to it, the house starts to burn. All she can do is get the people out on the front lawn to safety. And here's a visual for you. For some reason, she wanted to save the dining room table. So she had everybody go into the dining room, pick up the table, walk it out the front door, and just set it up with the chairs out there. It was almost like the entire tea party just moved to the front lawn. But while they're out there, they can only watch the house burn. Now, Alma, as I mentioned, loved her family's lands. So much so, she stayed. She didn't have insurance. It wasn't really a thing back then. She was also a writer. And we know writers don't make a huge amount of money. So she could stay here, but she couldn't fix the place up. So what does she do? She set up a tent just outside in front of the ruins there, lived inside the tent with all of her animals and her little crippled dog, and that's where she remained for 2 years. Now after 2 years, the citizens of Ancaster took pity on her, so they got charity money together to build her a wooden shed. It's like a little structure that stood right here, right where you guys are standing. And that's where she lived out the rest of her days. Okay. Now after that, it was a local investor named Charles Hill. He took over the lands in the ruins. Eventually he would then sell them or give them over to the city of Hamilton, would eventually become the Conservation Authority. And as I mentioned a few years back, the entire ruins were taken down and rebuilt from scratch so that they remain here for many generations to come. Now I'll start with a quick ghost story in relation. It actually factors into a couple of you said the same thing. So this is an area that we'll say people like to come out and visit. I'll say visit, but at night it's not really visiting. The correct term would be trespassing. So. But over generations, people loved doing this. It was sort of a tradition. And on one evening, a young lady had to be talked into it by her friends. Now, she was working that night, so she wasn't going to be coming out with them. But they said, oh, come out, meet us. We're going to tell a few ghost stories, scare each other, and then we'll leave. Don't worry, nothing will be touched. So she gives in. Now, she works until late into the evening. And as she's coming out, she's walking down the path right there. And as she's walking up towards the ruins, she can see the glow of a bonfire that was happening from the middle of the field. And she knows her friends are back here. But then she looks up to the second-story window. That window right there to the left. Now she looks up to the window from the other side, and what does she see? But the silhouette shadow of a woman, dressed in a dress, walking back and forth from behind the window frame. And the first thing the young lady thinks, how can my friends do this? Well, it's obvious, they came out here, they said they weren't going to cause any problems, but look, they've broken into this nice structure and they're rummaging around inside. So she's going to give them a piece of their mind, right? So she walks around the corner there, comes to the back, is about to say something, words get caught in her throat. She then realizes that everybody is there, Nobody's missing. They're all present and accounted for. And that's when she turns around and realizes for the first time that it isn't a structure, that it is these ruins, that there is no second floor. So the only way for the woman to have been there is to be floating in midair. Now I will go into the legend, because that is the most important piece of being out here. And then after that, if anybody has any questions, I guess, related to what you've intuited of certain locations, you can ask me. So the legend goes back to Colonel Otto Ives. I mentioned a military man, a very serious man, moves here with his wife Magdalene and his wife's niece, whom he saw as a daughter. Now, so when it comes to the time that she's at that age, you know, this time you have to find a correct suitor for the young girl to marry into the right family of Ancaster. It fell on Otto's shoulders to be that father figure for her. So he would step out and go to different families, set her up with all the eligible bachelors and young men in the town, and they would go out on dates, you know, supervised dates of course, but they'd go out on dates. And after it was done, she always said the same thing. I didn't like him. His ears were lopsided, he talked too much, he was too arrogant, whatever it was. She didn't like any of the guys. So after all of those dates, Otto at this point ready to tear out his hair, he's just frustrated. What's wrong with the young girl? Well, what he didn't know is she was already in love. She was in love with a young man named William Black. But here's the problem. William was the Ives family servant. You know, servant for the house, coachman, which factors into something else. Now, if you ever watched the show Downton Abbey, you know that that situation doesn't fly. In fact, it is not allowed at all. But William and the young lady whose name got lost to history, they also knew this as well. So as their courtship began, what could they do but sneak around to different parts of the woods here, away from prying eyes, so that their love could build? And their love did build. But for William, another feeling. Guilt. He didn't like the fact that he was lying to Mr. Ives. Yes, this was his boss. But as well, he saw the man as a father figure. It didn't sit well. The man always treated him nicely. Why would he lie to him? So he goes to the young lady, the niece. He tells her, let's just tell him. He sees me like a son. He'll see past all the old traditions. But she knew the truth. She said, oh, isn't this enough for you? Isn't our love enough? But it wasn't. So on one evening, it's the end of the day, they're sitting in the lounge of the old house. There's a lull in the conversation, and then William sees his opportunity. So he fights through those nerves to push it through, and he's like, I'm so sorry, I lied to you. Oh, I'm in love with your niece. We've been seeing each other for a bit, but don't worry, I'm going to make it right. I want to ask for her hand in marriage. There's silence. I hope that in that silence, Otto was coming around to the idea, but he'd be wrong. And Otto screams in his face, never. Never would I allow a liar, a lowly servant like you, to marry my niece. No, you can't have her hand. And no, you can't be here anymore. I want you gone by morning. And with those few sentences, William Black's life was ruined. So he steps out of the house, goes to the back, steps into the carriage house, and closes the door. And the next day, Otto Ives wakes up. He feels bad. You know, the kid, he didn't want to yell at him. He liked William. But of course he lied to him, so he's fired. He's got to leave. But he wants to go in the back. He wants to tell William, I'm going to help you find a new position with a family far away from my niece. So he goes around to the carriage house, opens the door, looks up to the loft where William normally sleeps. It's not there. That's when he sees the movement from the corner of his eye. And then looking over as his eyes adjust, what does he see? But William hanging from the rafters. Now, this wouldn't scare Otto Ives. No, remember, he was a military man. He saw so much violence and death on the battlefield. Men who died for something that mattered, in his opinion. And here was this kid throwing God's gift in his face for what? For love? It disgusted Otto. So the only thing he could do? Cut the rope. Let William's body land into a waiting cart of manure. Pull that cart up to where Sulphur Springs and Lover's Lane meets right now. That's the top of the hill you all drove down. He dug a large hole, dropped William in, noose still around his neck. Fills it in, comes back, tells his family, William's gone, and he's not coming back. Here's the thing. Otto Ives was actually wrong about that. Because now the legend will state that William Black does return, that he returns on every night of the full moon, walking down from where the grave is, down that winding road to these ruins, to walk around and look for his lost love. Yeah, you see some of the, thank you, some of the parts of the story, the history factoring into what you guys picked up. Sorry?
You need to do podcasting. I listen to podcasts. I listen to you 24/7.
I just want to say I didn't tell her to say that because
No,
I
she
do have
didn't.
a podcast.
All right, then. I don't like the name.
But it's not as polished as that. It's more laid back. But the story.
Honey, I'll take it.
Excellent. So that's the main. There's the one ghost story I wanted to tell you in the legend.
What do you think is truthful?
With legends, you always take it with a grain of salt. Definitely Otto Ives, historically,
true?
is truthful.
Okay. Is
The
there
niece,
actually a William Black?
we're not 100% sure. So there's an alternate.
Okay.
A story. It was a tutor who came here to teach Magdalene how to speak English,
Okay.
and he fell in love with her, but she was married to Otto, so it could never be. And the story is that he hanged himself from a tree.
Okay.
So that's kind of an alternate story, but either way, when the lands were sold to Leith,
Yeah.
they had to list, as they do today, any
Yeah.
suicides
Yeah.
that happened. And there was one listed. They don't say the name.
They don't say the name.
They just say there was a suicide on the land.
That's good to know. I mean, as we talked about, right, myths become legends, become like, there is no full moon walking down thing, what a load of baloney, right? But what a great entertainment piece. But there's truth. They often originate from some level of truth. So this is why I asked this question. Which is why, Todd always asks me the question. He says, "You're not afraid of that thing that you saw or the story that you heard?" And I'm not. But part of it is that we really have to bear witness to what is truth, not stories that have been told in the past. We have to be those observers of reality now. And a lot of the time, those things line up, and other times they're misaligned. And it's so fun to figure out what's truth and what isn't. So well done today, everybody.